So imagine if you had some in-laws who were a complete nightmare, and they were mocking every single thing that you did, whether it be a business you're trying to start, a food dish that you saw on the internet that you wanted to try. It doesn't matter what it is. They just badger you and mess with you over and over. Well, today's story is just like that, but this one's even further. The reason why the in-laws in today's story hate OP so much is because she's from lower class income. It's not a big deal, but apparently in their world it is. Here's the scoop. Do you guys want to know what hurts a dream and vision really fast? I'll tell you. It's listening to what people say about your dreams, your ideas, and business, especially, the naysayers. Over the last few years, I've grown a thick skin because of my toxic in-laws. I'll be honest, if I had not done that, my business would have crumbled because almost everyone laughed at me and never believed in what I was doing. So ever since I was a teenager, I had this business idea that I believe would change my finances and my life in general. But I never had the money to pursue it until after college. Somehow I believed that going to college and getting a good-paying job after college would enable me to go after my dreams, but I was wrong. So wrong. After I got the job, I couldn't even save at least $500 every month, and even if I managed to put aside that amount every month, it would take me at least 4 years to save up the amount of money I needed. I think by my second year of working, I began to lose interest in my vision because I was constantly burnt out and exhausted from working more than 50 hours in a week. It was in my second year of working that I met Jonathan, my husband. When I met him, I honestly didn't think that we would date, but life had other plans for me. Not to brag, but Jonathan's the sweetest man I've ever met. And if it were not for him, I don't know what would have become of me. In case you're wondering why I said I didn't think Jonathan and I would end up dating, it's because of our social differences, see, in society. I mean, Jonathan was obviously from a more upper class, and he was doing great financially, and I was just a young woman from a lower middle class fam, with a head full of dreams. So I'd say the difference between us was obvious. I think the first few weeks after I started dating Jonathan, I told him about my dream business idea, and how I badly wanted to bring it to life. Even though it was an idea no one had heard before, I believed that I could make things happen. And luckily for me, Jonathan believed it too. In fact, he was more excited about that idea than I was. 4 months after Jonathan and I started dating, he took me to his parents and introduced me to his partner. That day, Jonathan, his parents, and his siblings were having some sort of special dinner, and Jonathan thought it would be a great time to introduce me to them. I don't know why, but I thought that Jonathan's parents, especially his mother, whom he had told me so much about, would like me. Sadly, things took a different turn. I remember that evening like it happened yesterday. In fact, I don't think that I'll ever forget it. So after everyone settled down for dinner, Jonathan's mom began asking some questions. She asked about where I was schooled and what my parents did for a living and what I did. Since I was taught my whole life to be proud of my job or whatever I did, I told Jonathan's parents about, my parents and their jobs. And almost immediately, I could see the expression of disappointment written on their face. After that conversation, the rest of our dinner was awkwardly quiet. I often saw my mother-in-law throwing glances at Jonathan. That night, I didn't need a soothsayer to tell me that Jonathan's parents did not think that I was the right woman for their son. It was written all over their face, and their actions definitely spoke louder than words. One thing I love about Jonathan is how he did not end up being a mommy's boy, despite being the only son. I'm saying this because if Jonathan was a mommy's boy or a mommy pleaser, I'm 100% certain our relationship would have ended that night. To cut the long story short, Jonathan and I got married after a year and a half of dating, even when his parents kicked against him marrying a lowlife like me. Funny enough, when Jonathan's parents threatened him that they would not attend his wedding if he didn't stop his madness, Jonathan told them to their face that he didn't care if they showed up or not. He even made it crystal clear that their manipulation would not work on him, and if he wanted someone to stand as his parents, he would hire anyone to do it. Wow. Once he said that, his parents were forced to swallow their pride and attend our wedding. So, 1 year after Jonathan and I married, Jonathan told me to stop working and focus on more of my business idea. At first, when Jonathan said that, I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He was serious. Since Jonathan was a six-figure earner, he claimed that he did not see the need for me to keep working for peanuts while I had a business idea that could turn things around for us financially. So he insisted that I stop working, which I did. Now, I'll be honest, when I stopped working, I no longer had the financial ability to contribute a penny. Jonathan took care of literally everyone, including my own personal needs, and he did it for years. After I quit my job to focus on the business, with the huge capital Jonathan gave me, I thought the business would kick off that same year. You know when you're so excited and pumped about something or an idea that you think that idea will generate money, because it's one of a kind? Well, that's exactly how I felt about my business. I had imagined that I would make a ton of money in the first year. I'm talking enough money that would let me thank Jonathan in every way that I've been imagining. But those were just imaginations because the first year of my business was a complete mess. The second year, it wasn't so bad. Not at all, but it was far from what I expected, and watching my business go in the opposite direction of what I had envisioned really crushed me. If I told you that there were days I didn't want to give up or just close up the business and return to my 9-to-5 life, I'd be lying to you. I was so confused and tried different strategies and approaches. I mean, literally every thing I could think of, but I still struggled. If it was just my business that gave me a headache, I don't think that I would be sharing this story. I'm sharing because my in-laws decide to make my life a living hell. I don't know how they found out, but in the third year of our marriage, which, by the way, was the second year of my business, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law found out that I wasn't working, and Jonathan was footing all the bills so I could focus on my business. The day my mother-in-law and sister-in-law found out, they came to our house unannounced and began to yell at me. They called me all the horrible names you could think of, and they said that I was a smart gold digger who was using my failed business to mooch off Johnny. I won't lie, hearing that really hurt me, because I was trying my best every day to take my business to the level I wanted it to be. In addition to that, my sister-in-law mocked my business, and I remember her saying that a beggar on the streets had more chances of making money than my business did. Those are the words that I never forget. After that day, I thought that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would not bring up the business again, but that was just the beginning. Every time my mother-in-law saw me, they would mock me in the face and laugh at my business, and the most painful part was that they never spoke in hushed tones. They spoke loudly, so I could hear them mocking me. Just like that, I could hear every single word. They would purposely call my business a failure and wait for me to respond, but I tried my best to just ignore them, and drew motivation from them instead. For nearly 2 years, I endured all kinds of humiliation you can think of, and focused on grooming my business. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law turned me into a laughingstock at family dinners, to the point where I stopped attending any functions. They even went as far as telling their extended family members that Jonathan was wasting his money on something that would never come to life, but he could not see it because I had bewitched them. You know, can you believe it? Sincerely, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have crossed their boundaries so many times that I've lost the count of numbers. I wanted to rip their head off. I know some people are lucky to be born with a silver spoon, but that doesn't mean that you should trample on other people who are trying to gain their feet financially. Because of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law always looking down on me, mocking my business and insulting me at the slightest opportunity, I banned them from visiting me in Jonathan's home. But despite banning them, they did something that caused me to lose my cool. So 4 days ago, I was with Jonathan at home with his mother and sister when they came to our house. At first, when I saw them, I was mad at Jonathan for inviting them over, but I later found out that Jonathan had nothing to do with it. They actually came on their own because they wanted to tell Jonathan to divorce me and marry someone they claimed was good for him, and also in his social class. Concerning divorce, this wasn't the first time my mother-in-law had tried to pressure Jonathan to end things with me. I remember sometime last year she gave Jonathan all the good reasons to leave a low life like me and marry a girl that was worthy of him, but Jonathan refused. This whole divorce thing even caused Jonathan to create a distance with his parents and sister, but they just kept pushing. You know, for me to come back to my house to tell my husband to divorce me, it was the last straw that broke that camel's back. And in anger, I talked back to my mother-in-law, which I've never done before. Well, guess what, guys? In the heat of the argument, my sister-in-law, who had been divorced 4 times with no children, called me a barren gold digger. Oh, and she said that I must have sold my eggs for money because that's what lowlives like me do. Hearing that was very painful because not only was I struggling with my business, but I was also struggling to conceive. And my sister-in-law calling me barren opened up the emotions I bottled up for so long. I can't really explain how it happened, but the next thing I remember is slapping my sister-in-law and pulling out some of her hair. I was like a rabid dog, no kidding. I have never been that angry in my entire life. And even Jonathan had not seen me angry like that. Thankfully, Jonathan separated us before things escalated, but he wasn't pleased that I attacked his sister. He claimed that I should have just exchanged words with her and not let my emotions control me. Now that I think of it, I think Jonathan is right. Maybe I should have handled things differently, although I'm glad I helped my sister-in-law get rid of some unwanted hair. The issue now is that my in-laws, including my father-in-law, who's the calm one, are pretty mad at me and they're demanding that I apologize to my sister-in-law. They even called for a family meeting, but I don't want to attend or even apologize to anyone. I think everything is fair and square. She called me a barren gold digger, and I slapped her. Sue me. Updates. Number 1. Hello, family. I wanted to say thank you for the warm comments and suggestions. When I shared my story 3 days ago, I did not think that you guys would be so nice and understanding. Thank you. So, like some of you suggested, I've slept on this issue and I've made a decision, which is originally against what I had in mind. As much as I love the way I handled things, my husband's still against it, and he's insisting that I attend the family meeting. The truth is that I love Jonathan so much. He loves me, and he's literally the only support system I have. I would not want a small situation like this to ruin our marriage, so I've decided to attend the family meeting. Will I be apologizing to Sheila, my sister-in-law? Yes, I will. But right after she apologizes for calling me a barren gold digger and insinuating that I sold my eggs. Jonathan and I have reached an agreement, and that's exactly what'll happen. Aside from making this decision because of Jonathan, I'm also doing it because of the respect I have for my father-in-law. Unlike his toxic wife and daughter, the man has been so nice to me. At least that's what I think. You know, the meeting has been scheduled for this Saturday, and Jonathan and I will be attending it together. So guys, I do have tea for all of you. 2 days after I slapped my sister-in-law at my house, my crazy mother-in-law came to my business place to make such a scene. That afternoon, I was talking to my staff in my office when I heard some pretty loud voices outside. It happened that my mother-in-law wanted to storm into my office without introducing herself, and one of my staff stopped her. When my staff got in her way, she began to scream and say something like, "This business was built off my son's money, so you have no right to stop me." Well, you know what? Guess what, guys? My mother-in-law did not actually come to attack me like I thought. She came to mock my business and absolutely insult me. Yeah, can you believe it? And my staff too. She also said that it was only a matter of time before I'd be out of Jonathan's life and all the privileges I'm enjoying would simply stop. Because I didn't want to make things worse than they already were. I told my staff to leave her. You guys, when I said that, my mother-in-law grabs a bottle of water and was sitting there right there on the table. She walked to me and emptied it across my head. Then she threw the bottle at me and walked away. I know you might be wondering why I did not react or put her in her place. I didn't do that because I didn't want to complicate things. Besides, if I touched her, I don't think Jonathan would ever forgive me. So I allowed her to humiliate herself and leave. Immediately she left, I called Jonathan and reported everything to him. I didn't know that Jonathan would go to his parents' house to confront his mother that same afternoon, and doing that caused even more issues. So, guys, the last few days have been really rough for me because my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have been blowing up my phone with calls and messages, and they're accusing me of turning Jonathan's heart against them. In fact, if they had not sent me those messages, I would not have known that Jonathan went to tell his mom and warned her to stay away from me. He didn't even talk about it. He just told me that he handled it. As it is, I don't know how the family meeting will turn out. But however it turns out, I'm glad I have Jonathan on my side. Anyways, that's all for now. I promise to make another update once I return from the meeting. Thank you for the comments and every single suggestion. Updates number 2. Hey guys, thank you, first of all. I'm sorry I did not make this update last weekend like I promised. Something came up, and it completely took my time. In my last update, I mentioned that I had agreed to go to my family meeting with Jonathan, as we did last weekend, and boy was it a mess. Guys, as soon as Jonathan and I entered my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law began yelling at me and calling me names. I could have sworn that she didn't want me to be there, I can tell. Thankfully, my father-in-law managed to calm her, and we started the meeting. Even though my father-in-law had told my mother-in-law several times to keep quiet, she just didn't listen. She just kept calling me horrible names to my hearing and said nasty things about my business. I could tell that whatever Jonathan had said or done to her made her mad, and she was transferring her aggression to me. Well, halfway into the meeting, my father-in-law told my sister-in-law to narrate what had happened, and she lied to my face. Even in my presence, she told my father-in-law that she arrived at my house with my mother-in-law, and when my mother-in-law was talking to me, I got mad and attacked her. She skipped the whole part where she called me a barren gold digger because she knew her father would understand why I acted the way I did. In fact, I understood why my father-in-law badly wanted the meeting to be held. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had told so many lies and he believed them. So, after my sister-in-law cooked up her own story for her father, he turns to me and asks me what happened. I told him literally everything. Guys, can you believe that after I narrated my own side of the story, my mother-in-law starts to scream at me, saying that I have no right to speak in her house, and that I should apologize to my sister-in-law immediately. No kidding, as soon as she said that, I burst into laughter. I told her that I would only apologize if she and my sister-in-law apologized first for showing up at my house and trying to ruin my marriage. Honestly, with the way things were going and from the way mother-in-law sounded, I knew she would not apologize. My sister-in-law also made it very obvious, somehow saying that really infuriated my stepmother, and instead of yelling more at me like I had expected, she began yelling at Jonathan. You see, what you've caused because of you, this lowlife can speak to me however she likes. That's what my mother-in-law said to Jonathan. Now that wasn't the first time my mother-in-law was calling me a lowlife. It was a nickname she and sister-in-law used to mock me with, and Jonathan had never said anything about it before. But that day, Jonathan screamed at his mother and warned her to never call me a lowlife again. As if screaming at his mom was not enough, he literally grabbed my bag and told us to leave. Then, the meeting was over. I can still remember my mother-in-law's voice in my head, screaming for Jonathan to return to the meeting as we walked out. It was epic. I guess Jonathan had gotten enough of his family drama. He didn't even care about his father, he just held my hands and dragged me. Right there after, well, it was over. I received a threatening text message from mother-in-law saying that I had succeeded in tearing up their family and she would make me pay for it. Well, when I showed it to Jonathan, he said that she would do nothing, and if at all she tried to do anything, he would report her straight to the police. Final updates. Update number 3. Hello. Some of you might have probably forgotten me because it's been, 3 months since I made a last update? Honestly, the same reason I didn't update was because I didn't really have anything going on for me. But now I do. I mean, a lot has happened in the last few weeks, and it would be unfair if I kept everything to myself. I remember when I shared my story and I mentioned that I was really struggling with my business. My in-laws made things worse by constantly mocking me. So many people encouraged me to keep going even though things were going in the opposite direction, and I'm so glad I kept going. It really pleases me to announce that my business finally blew up, and I got recognized in my hometown. Guys, my company even won a lot of money. I made it to the local news and appeared on the TV to talk about my business and what my company was all about. Would you believe it if I told you that all these things happened so fast I didn't even see it was coming? I'll be honest, when I got this breakthrough, I was at the edge of breaking down. Especially with all the things that have been happening. I didn't even think that my business would win a grant, I applied for a while ago and even got recognition in my hometown. Anyways, guys, the reason I'm making this update isn't just because of my business, but because of something else. So last week, after my business made it on the local newspaper and I appeared on TV, Jonathan insisted that we host a little party to celebrate our new milestone. He had invited our friends, my family, and all my staff, but he didn't invite his family since we weren't on talking terms. On D-Day, he had arranged everything for the number of guests that we were expecting, and yes, we were that strict because access to the party was based on invitation. Well, that evening, while Jonathan and I were having fun with our guests, we heard an argument outside. And before we could wrap our heads around what was happening, mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law barged into the party. I could literally hear my mother-in-law screaming at the lady at the door. Yep, she kept saying, "This is my daughter-in-law's party. You can't keep us out." Guys, as soon as my mother-in-law entered the room and she spotted me, she smiled and opened up her arms. Then she walked towards me to hug me. Heck, she almost hugged me, but I stopped her on time. You know that moment when you do something nice and your archenemy tries to act all familiar with you so she can be in the good light? Well, that's exactly what my mother-in-law and sister-in-law did. They wanted to be a part of my success story and pretend that we had a good relationship. They even had the nerve to show up at my party, especially with the way our last meeting ended. My mother-in-law had forgotten so soon that she was yelling at me and calling me names the last time we met. So I gave her a taste of her own medicine. And before I threw them out of my party, my sister-in-law, who was always mocking my business, came to me and said, "I've always believed in you, and I knew you would make us proud." Guys, the minute she said us, I was livid. I began yelling at them. I don't know, maybe they were thinking I would put up with their show and let them ruin my party, but I didn't. I ensured I told everyone how they were such terrible in-laws. Then I kicked them out of the party myself and warned them to never show their face at my house or place of business again, or I would call the cops on them, and they left in embarrassment. I was thinking Jonathan would try to defend them or talk me into letting them stay, but he didn't. He was actually on my side, and I'm pretty sure his parents were disappointed he did not let them attend the party. And to cut the story short, I've officially cut ties with my in-law. Maybe Jonathan, I don't know, can still have something to do with them if he wants, but I want absolutely nothing to do with them.